Welcome, everybody. This is the second webinar of Webinar Week as part of Regenerate 2022. During this session, we will be hearing about carbon farming markets. We are joined today by a fantastic collaboration between our three speakers, Bryan Van Stippen, who is the director at the National Indian Carbon Coalition, Brian Bartle, who is his title is he is there to channel partners with Indigo Ag, and we also have JD Drennan, who is the senior manager of technical service with Indigo Ag. I'm going to let them give a slightly longer introduction to themselves when we get to their presentation. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for that introduction, Sarah. And we want to thank the Cubana Coalition for allowing us to be a part of this webinar this week. We know there's a lot of information that's going to be shared. We really wanted to be there in person next week, but with some scheduling issues, just were unable to participate in person. So next best thing, doing something over Zoom, as we all enjoy and love over these last few years, as Sarah had mentioned. Again, my name is Bryan Van Stippen. I am a member of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin. I'm physically located in Green Bay, Wisconsin, just outside the exterior boundaries of our reservation lands at my office. We were originally located in New York State, relocated to the London, Ontario area in Canada, and then finally a last move made to the Green Bay area, coming down Duck Creek and settling just outside the Bay of Green Bay. I'm a tribal attorney by trade and have been in this position for approximately 5.5 years now as the program director for the National Indian Carbon Coalition. We work with indigenous populations throughout North America, which includes tribal nations in the continental United States, Alaska Native villages and corporations, Native Hawaiian organizations, as well as First Nations in Canada. And one of the things that we want to discuss today is our relationship that we put together with Indigo Ag over the last few years. We received a USDA NRCS Conservation Innovation Grant to introduce some of their services into Indian country. Indigo obviously works with any sort of producer. Our program is trying to get more indigenous producers to participate in their services in the carbon marketplace. So I'm going to give a little brief introduction again as to who we are and how our relationship was formed and what we look at when we're trying to explore the opportunities to develop projects with indigenous populations, and then pass it off to Brian and JD to explain more details about Indigo and the program that we're trying to put together and again introduce to more Native producers, but as works for any sort of producer that could potentially be on this call today. So who we are, the National Indian Carbon Coalition was created by the Indian Land Tenure Foundation, as well as the Intertribal Agricultural Council. I'll give a quick shout out for IAC. Their conference is coming up in about a month, 6 weeks. It's December 6th through the 8th in Las Vegas. It's a very large conference. A lot of great information is shared there if anybody's interested. So ILTF, IAC came together in 2011 to create the National Indian Carbon Coalition to help educate tribal nations as to what carbon projects entailed, the benefits and detriments of it, what was all necessary to participate in the marketplace. But those two organizations are both nonprofit entities that have been working in Indian country for a combined 50 years. So a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge on practices and helping Native producers, tribal landowners to effectively manage their lands. One of the things that we want to focus on, again, is looking at the carbon markets or carbon sequestration projects. How do we develop those? We have been focusing a lot on forest-based lands in our origination, but have now expanded into more soil-based projects as well, which we consider to be grassland projects, grazing projects, row crops, anything else outside of essentially forest-based lands. So we see that these are great opportunities for economic development, especially over the last few years with tribal nations losing a lot of revenue from their gaming and hospitality. It was quite evident to a lot of indigenous communities that they needed to expand and diversify their economies. They could not simply focus on gaming or hospitality to fund their services. And so looking at how to protect and preserve their tribal natural resources rather than exploit or extract those natural resources by participating in the carbon market was an opportunity that we believe makes a lot of sense for tribes. Our mission is to preserve tribal land ownership and reduce the effects of climate change by, again, protecting and preserving those natural resources and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So some of the issues that we have seen over time has been within the tribal history is the extraction and exploitation techniques. A lot of commercial timber harvesting, a lot of mineral extractions, fossil fuel extractions on tribal lands, not very infrequently did the majority of that revenue go to the tribal nation itself. A lot of times that was a contract with an outside developer that would give the tribe a cut of that revenue generated, but never nearly enough. Or in other instances, the federal government would negotiate lease rates or harvest rates for the tribes, in which were less than beneficial for the tribal landowners, and more beneficial again for the outside third-party contractor. So for so long, we've had an issue with seeing that practice occur. And when the carbon markets came into fruition, we saw this as an opportunity to establish stronger sustainable management practices, help protect those natural resources so that they would be here for our future generations. Some of the benefits that we believe, besides the revenue generation, is the preservation of land ownership, the promotion of land stewardship, which again is some of the opportunities that we partnered with Indigo to explore, greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and then promotion of additional co-benefits or stacked benefits, some of the terminology that they're utilizing in the marketplace today, but looking at the promotion of soil health, ecological diversity, water and air quality. We are also exploring the societal benefits for our health and mental wellness for tribal communities by protecting and preserving these natural resources. So we can see that that a lot of the natural resources that are within the reservation boundaries are culturally significant to the tribes, and by preserving those cultural resources, it has a net benefit effect on the well-being of the tribal community itself. Some of the things that we look at when we're exploring the opportunity to engage with the tribe is just explaining what the carbon markets entail. There's a lot of complexities of establishing a carbon project. There's a lot of moving pieces apart. It takes a long time. Development of these projects that we've focused on for specifically the forest-based projects are a couple of years for the development process, and there's capital that's involved. So there's money that's needed to be utilized up front to get these projects to move forward. So it takes a long time, and there is not a lot of, I would say, risk, but a lot of concern about how these projects move forward and who to work with in the industry, as there is in every area. You know, some organizations understand Indian country better than others, and some organizations are actually very interested in working with tribes and wanting to ensure that these projects are successful. And sometimes you have those, what we just call fly-by-night organizations that are just out to it because they see that this is a very lucrative opportunity and are just trying to do a cash grab and get in and out, get out as fast as they can. We want to provide unbiased, independent information and data to the tribes. So we work with the tribal nations to help develop a lot of information that they need to make informed decisions. And again, that's a time-consuming process. We have some other grant funds that we utilize to help develop feasibility studies or energy audit plans or climate sustainable plans, all kinds of different things that a tribe may need to have so that they can understand what their land base actually has for them available to enter into a carbon market, and just present that to the leadership, membership, and staff, hopefully so that it helps them make a decision, but so they understand what that information all means, rather than trying to use a bunch of large scientific terms, explaining what these projects mean for a tribal community so that they can move forward. One of the other areas that we focus on is web mapping and satellite imagery. A lot of times, not every tribal nation has a solid GIS department. There's 574 tribal nations in the United States, not including the Native Hawaiian organizations and or First Nations in Canada. And everybody's on a different level. So we don't necessarily know what type of information they may have electronically. And we came together and developed a program to help set up some web mapping opportunities so they could look at their lands. Education and guidance on carbon projects, that's the nitty gritty. When we start working closely with the staff to help them understand, again, the nuances of what the carbon projects entail. And then hopefully at some point in time, and this is where, again, Indigo comes in, do aggregation of carbon projects, looking at more of how can we get more, not only tribal nations involved, but individual tribal member producers to participate in the carbon market industry, because it just makes it easier the more land that's included into a project. So I just want to quickly go through some of the project steps. When we're looking at the development of a carbon project, we have to create a feasibility study. This is working directly and getting information from the tribe along with publicly available information to put together a feasibility study to determine whether or not these projects could be economically viable for the tribal nation. If it is proven to be economically viable and the tribe finds it in their best interest, then we would move into the development stage. And this requires a heavy lift and a large capital expense to get this process moving forward, to contract with all the outside third parties to develop the forest inventory, to do the quantification and modeling that we needed. So we bring in a forest inventory crew to do a boots on the ground inventory. When we're focusing specifically on forest-based projects, and then do all the modeling and the reporting. As I mentioned, we're now entering into soil-based projects with some grasslands, in which we do some other modeling as well. And then with Indigo, we're looking at grazing and row crop land. So I have multiple different partners and developers dependent upon what the natural resource base is, and how we move forward with the analysis of those lands. Once we get through that entire process, there's a verification and registry review. So dependent upon the type of registry that we place these projects in, they have to review all of the data and all of our modeling data after we put that together to ensure that it is accurate and verifiable. And during that entire time, then we're looking at credit sales to find organizations that are looking to acquire carbon credits. Usually, the tribes that we have engaged with do not want to participate with any oil and gas organizations. That's what tribal nations currently feel. And it's up to every individual tribe as to whom they want to be able to sell their credits to. So we want to ensure that any organization that is acquiring credits from a tribal project, the tribe itself has some say as to whom that would be. And then we have monitoring, reporting requirements after the projects are entailed. Again, we're looking specifically at forest-based projects with this statement of the 40 to 100 years. With soil-based projects, it's approximately 20 years. And then even with the program that we're trying to implement with Indigo, it's up to 1 year. So there's a bunch of different opportunities that we see for tribal landowners. And again, it's dependent upon what that natural resource base is going to be. So through a program that we developed, which we call the Tribal Land Conservation Initiative, and again, we're rolling this specific program with forested lands, but we're rolling out a new program with Indigo on our soil-based projects, and putting that underneath the Tribal Land Conservation Initiative. So for these opportunities, we worked with a handful of tribes, and some of the things that we have seen why tribal nations are entering into this marketplace is because we work specifically on a voluntary market rather than the compliance-based market. So the compliance-based market is the California Cap and Trade Program. There are some requirements, excuse me, on the California market that tribal nations just are not comfortable with. that we've run into over the years of engaging with tribal nations. And so we wanted to focus specifically on the voluntary market because there is a duration of 40 years for the project rather than 100 years under the California cap and trade market. There is also a requirement for a limited waiver of sovereign immunity on the compliance-based market, and some tribes are just not comfortable with that, providing a limited waiver of sovereign immunity. So we've done away with that by entering the projects on the voluntary market. And then some of the things that Nick specifically helps through the Tribal Land Conservation Initiative, and this is even for the projects that we're developing on grasslands and other types of lands, is that we will cover the upfront capital costs to start the project itself. And we will contract with all of those parties so that the tribal producer or the tribal nation does not need to do that work themselves. So basically, a landowner or a tribe would contract with the National Indian Carbon Coalition. We then take on the responsibility of covering the expenses for that third party and the contract with that third party, just to alleviate some of the responsibility off the tribe itself. Currently, we are saying that we will not sell any carbon credits for less than $10 a credit. Again, that's dependent upon the type of project. Bryan and JD will get into some of the price points for the program that we're rolling out, specifically on row crops. But for right now, on forest-based carbon projects, we are no less than $10 a credit. And then, as I mentioned a little while ago, the tribe does have some say as to whom would be able to acquire the credits. So if they say, we don't want any oil and gas on the front end, I just don't even go look for buyers that are in that industry. So quickly, a couple of the projects that we have engaged with, again, and these are all forest-based projects. One is with the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. They're in the northern part of Minnesota. So trees don't grow quite as quickly there just because of the cold weather. But we've been able to enroll a project on 8,200 acres, generating approximately 437,000 credits that are available on the market currently. And we project that revenue to be about 5.7. It actually has gone up a little bit just due to some of the price points that we are currently getting for our forest-based carbon credits. We're also working with the Cubana Bay Indian community. They are in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. This is on 16,500 acres of land, generating approximately 834,000 credits. And again, a little bit higher price. I think the last time I penciled it out was around $12 million in revenue that was going to be generated for the tribe. And then finally, a project with the Mississippi Band of Choctaw. This is on 26,000 acres. They're down in Mississippi, obviously. Trees grow a lot quicker there. So we're going to generate approximately 1.7 million credits for approximately $24 million in revenue that goes towards the tribe when it's all said and done. So again, quickly, the National Indian Carbon Coalition is a joint venture of the Indian Land Tenure Foundation as well as the Intertribal Agriculture Council. We have multiple different programs that we're rolling out. We started with forest-based projects. We are now in the process of developing other types of projects on different types of natural resources. Like I mentioned, grasslands, grazing lands, pasture lands, row crop lands, wetlands, peatlands. So it's looking at and trying to determine what type of natural resource the tribe has, and then looking and see if we can figure out what type of protocol would make the most sense for that tribal project. Again, I'm going to pass this off to Bryan and JD here to talk more about the Conservation Innovation Grant that we received earlier this year, and then rolling out the services that Indigo has to tribal producers. But again, it relates to other producers that may be listening in on this webinar today. So thank you.
Give me 1 second. I thought we just had this all squared away, and now it's making me verify. But I'll start it off just with introductions. So, yep, I'm Bryan Bartle, coming in from New Mexico today. Been with Indigo for about 4.5 years, but currently I work on our channel partners team, where we're looking at basically partnerships on the supply side. Obviously, our partnership today that we're going to highlight is one we're really excited about, specifically looking at how we can bring a carbon farming, agricultural based carbon credit program to Native American producers. But we also work with other partners as well to really kind of create a ecosystem approach across the agriculture value chain to make sure that, when growers are making some of these practice changes, we're ensuring that they have the most success, that everybody has, the same theories, the same outcome and goals in mind when they're working with that grower, thinking about, how to best incorporate cover crops into their rotation or starting to reduce tillage. Beyond that, I'm originally from Michigan, from a family farm. And yeah, while I get the slides up here, I'll let JD Drennan provide his intro.
Sure. Thanks, Bryan. Thanks for everybody for joining today. My name is JD Drennan. I am in Oklahoma and was asked at the beginning to kind of give our land acknowledgement. Anybody that's familiar with Oklahoma knows that the land acknowledgement in Oklahoma gets pretty muddled. We're home to 37 federally recognized tribes. My wife is a member of the Pawnee Nation, and our adoptive daughter is a member of the Iowa tribe of Oklahoma. So kind of that's my acknowledgement there. Like Bryan, I come from a farming and ranching background in Oklahoma, cow-calf operation. My wife and I run a cow-calf operation in Northwest Oklahoma. And I lead our technical services division for Indigo. We provide the agronomic advice, the think tank, the clarity of answers for growers and producers as they go down the carbon journey. Whenever they start to have those what if questions, those come to my team, and we have a large group of industry agronomists that can assist with any of those questions going forward. But Bryan?
Yeah, everyone give me a thumbs up, or maybe JD, you can give me a thumbs up. You can see my screen, right?
Gotcha.
Okay. And then to Sarah in the chat, great questions. We're going to jump into the presentation. I think we will hit on those questions. If we do not, we'll circle back around after we're done with the presentation to make sure we do hit on those good questions. So yeah, to start, this is maybe a little bit of a review of what Bryan already hit on, but just to reiterate, what are carbon credits, what are carbon markets, and then maybe even more specifically, what's the unique opportunity for agriculture within this ecosystem and opportunity is something we really wanted to set the stage with. So, first, how does carbon farming markets work? And you could extend this to even just carbon credits in general. Like Bryan mentioned, we also explicitly kind of operate in the voluntary carbon credit market, not the compliance market. It is something we are looking at tentatively as do we think about getting more involved in that space as that continues to grow. But for right now, we exclusively work in the voluntary carbon credit market. And that really works, first step, the demand side. So it's corporations, taking the first step and deciding, they want to be more environmentally friendly. They want to, be carbon neutral, better stewards of the world. And some of that is based on that company's, just core values and ethos. And some of it, frankly, is definitely consumer driven or politically driven, where they recognize, that they need to be proactive in this, to make sure they're, supporting their customers and kind of listening to them. So the first things first is corporations kind of seeking to reduce their carbon footprint. And I think it's very important to kind of lay out first and foremost that, the first step for these corporations is to look in the mirror, think about how they do business today and how they can improve those processes to reduce their greenhouse gas footprint. Carbon credits, be it insets or offsets, are really an opportunity to ideally get those companies that last mile. There's some things like, throw out building a car or something. It's very difficult today with the technology that we have available to be, say, carbon neutral, trying to build a car or a van or a train or whatever you want to use. And so it's an opportunity. Hey, we are doing the best we can in a lot of our, updating our processes to reduce our greenhouse footprint, but either it's extremely expensive and or the technology just doesn't exist today for us to be completely carbon neutral with the technology available to us today. And so that's where carbon credits come in. And specifically when it comes to agriculture, it's an opportunity for growers, to change things up, to be better stewards, we'll talk about some of the practices that qualify, but thinking about how do we build soil organic carbon in soils, so sequestration, and also think about how can we produce, more crop, a healthier crop with less inputs and less greenhouse gas emissions. So thinking about how can we better optimize inputs and build up soil organic matter to, abate greenhouse gas emissions. But that's not necessarily good enough. We have to have the grower did it, but then we need to be able to measure that, quantify it, verify it to be able to produce a carbon credit, which we'll dive into that process here a little later. And then lastly, that carbon credit can be, sold to a corporation to help them kind of reduce their greenhouse gas footprint. And, the demand for this is really exciting. That's really where a lot of carbon programs are coming in, partially because of this chart right here, and specifically calling out 2015, when the Paris Agreement was signed. The opportunity and the growth and interest of corporations, that's what this graph is showing, is the percent of Fortune Global 500 companies that have made pledges to be carbon neutral, or what's called a science-based target, net zero. And I think that's the one there that is really exciting, especially for Indigo and honestly for the environment. As you can see, there's initially a green line. That's just companies saying, hey, I'm trying to be carbon neutral. Especially coming out of the Paris Agreement, there was a couple of other, once again, voluntary policies, but a lot of popularity on companies kind of aligning their programs with those policies about like, all right, what is carbon neutral? Like, let's agree on some of the science. Like, let's agree on how we're going to measure your greenhouse gas footprint internally, and then also thinking about both, carbon credits. What is a good carbon credit, and how should you be looking at carbon offsets or carbon insets to help reduce that footprint? And so, as you can see, I think the biggest takeaway, not only is there a lot of demand out there and continuing to grow, but specifically that community is looking at science-based, rigorous processes about their carbon credits, because, directly, one of on the demand side, our customer, are these companies that are looking for carbon offsets. The other indirectly, interest that we have to keep in mind is the scientific community. If the scientific community doesn't necessarily agree with what we're doing as far as carbon credits, companies are not going to be interested in buying those, because indirectly they need this general scientific community, the environmental community, to be aligned with that this is the right way to go about this. And ideally, preventing some negative issues around, say, greenwashing, which we'll dive into a little bit around that concern. But in general, we're talking about a carbon market that has the potential to reach $50 billion by 2030. I think this was from a McKinsey report. So, just once again, highlighting that market potential moving forward. And specifically with quality carbon credits, science-based, verified credits, the potential is there for that to rapidly increase. And that's kind of what this is showing. This is based off of some Bloomberg projections on where carbon credits could go, because there really is, specifically within the registry approved, and verified segment, which we'll discuss the difference between that and other carbon markets. That demand is really high because there isn't a supply out there. A lot of programs haven't gone through that process quite yet, and so there just isn't the same demand for other carbon credits as there is for registry verified. And so that's a real high, exciting potential here as this market kind of continues to grow. And I also want to just highlight once again, agriculture is not the only solution. Obviously, Bryan works on forestry projects as well. This is part of a suite, a collection of opportunities where we can, we're going to need, quite frankly, if we're going to hit some of these climate goals, we're going to have to think about different technologies and different systems to reduce our greenhouse gas footprint as a world, as a planet. But agriculture is a really attractive one and a really exciting one to be able to leverage to meet this demand. Specifically, I mentioned a little earlier this idea of abatement, which is basically avoidance. And then the other part is sequestration. And anyway, agriculture has this very attractive potential in that it, through these practices, you hit on both of those. I think tillage is a great one. If you think about reducing your tillage, ideally going maybe no-till, that's not only building soil organic matter in the soil, that's also preventing CO2 from being released through tillage. And even more, every tillage pass obviously takes fuel, and there's an emission there. So agriculture is really attractive because of that you get both abatement, avoiding greenhouse gas being released, and actual sequestration, where we're actually taking carbon from the atmosphere and being able to kind of trap that into soil through photosynthesis, and as seen through increasing your organic matter. Agriculture is also a very attractive option just because of acreage. If you look at the world today, there's a lot of land that's in agricultural production, and that's a major opportunity to use it not just for producing, be it fiber, be it food that us as a planet needs, but it's also a potential climate solution. So it's a way to basically grow two crops at the same time. It's a really attractive opportunity as we think about climate markets. Yeah, and I mean, we'll dive in a little bit more, but I mean, I think this is a good, when we're talking about adopting a practice, what are we talking about? I think probably on this call, a lot of people have heard about a lot of these practices already, talking about cover crops, talking about diversifying your crop rotation, no-till, or honestly, any sort of reduction in tillage, and as well as, agri inputs, thinking about how can we better optimize your nitrogen program, or phosphorus, or potassium. We also have grazing on here. That's one that we'll kind of dive into a little bit later. As it is today, our program does not work directly with grazing. Outside of, we have a special grant with NICC where we're looking for specifically some Native American producers to kind of do some joint research on grazing, to hopefully have that be part of our program in the future. And also innovation in the future. I think that's a real exciting one. These are practices, going back, we'll talk a little bit about the registry, but a lot of these are proven, right? Like cover crops, as far as soil health and what they can do, are, there's a lot of research out there, but there's also a lot of exciting research being done into what's next, right? What are some practices we can start thinking about? We talk about prairie strips, we talk about rock weathering, a lot of things that we're absolutely looking into the future about, how do we quantify these and measure these and potentially open up other opportunities for better management in the future as we continue to learn, know more. That middle section is another one we'll dive a little bit more into here later in a slide, but there's also reasons to adopt these practices on an operational level beyond carbon credits, right? Increasing your organic matter and soil health has a lot of intrinsic benefits beyond just carbon. You're talking about optimizing inputs, thinking of nitrogen use efficiency for every, for every 0.1% of organic matter you get, right? Like you're improving your nitrogen efficiency, you're improving that, quite honestly, the production potential of that field. Thinking about drought tolerance and flood resistance, there's a lot of additional benefits that these practices have. And then lastly, we do, this is really how do we measure, verify, and once again, thinking about this second crop, this carbon credit, how do we enable that to be another, revenue stream for growers, this second crop? I will say, today we have carbon credits, which we'll discuss a little bit. There's additionality involved there. It has to be a newer practice that you've adopted. That said, we are looking also into future opportunities. We have a few pilots going around what's called Scope 3, which is once again, another opportunity to kind of drive value to growers that have been doing these practices for a while. But jumping in, why indigo? I think some of the things that really drive the value for our program and the things that we're really excited about, I can actually even jump to the next one. The first one's flexibility. We mentioned some of those practices that qualify. So there is, our program is based around additionality because it is a carbon offset. That's something that is required going through a registry, that you do need a practice to truly be new and additional. That said, we're very flexible. We're not telling you what to do. We're not telling you, hey, you need to go no-till with a cover crop, and that's not our program. JD mentioned, JD and his team of agronomists are absolutely there to help and support, you and other growers make maybe the best decision for your operation. But that being said, every operation is different. Maybe you're not comfortable going no-till. Maybe based on your crop rotation, that might not work. That's fine. To qualify for our program, thinking about tillage, it's all about like, hey, can I at least just go from a conventional, tillage operation to vertical till, or even just like, hey, maybe today you're doing 2 passes, fall and spring. How can we think through strategies to get that down to 1 pass? All of those qualify for our program. JD, I saw you went off mute.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add in, you hit on it there. It's truly meeting the producer where they're at, and then providing avenues to move forward. And I'm glad you put this picture on this slide here, and that's Adam Chappell. For those that don't know, he's a cotton producer in Cotton Plant, Arkansas. And if you look at the ground below Adam, that is a mat of terminated cereal rye, and he has planted no-till cotton into there, has 0 nitrogen input and 0 petrochemical additions after the fact. So he's using the soil, he's using the benefits of the practices to increase the production of his cotton crop growing forward. And if it's a grower, like Adam, we can meet him there. If it's a grower that is still out there pulling a moldboard and doesn't know what the first step is, we can definitely come in alongside and help make some of those decisions, to get them on the best foot going forward.
Absolutely. I'll just jump into some of the other benefits. Yeah, wow. No, there is no grower fees. This is something that we really wanted to make sure, as far as there's not being any sort of barrier to entry. You don't have to buy a special product. You don't have to have a subscription to a software or anything. It is free for for a grower. You can sign up and roll a field, and you're available to participate. There's no fee, or you don't have to buy a special product or anything. Revenue share is another one we're really excited about. It's built into our contract today. We have a $20 a ton floor price right now. That being said, we sold our most recent crop for $30 a ton. That said, as we move forward, we've already seen internally how much prices have increased, just based on that demand and where the market is heading. As prices increase every year, as a grower who signs up for this program, you get 75% of that profit moving forward. So, this year we sold for 30. If next year we sell for 40, that's the price you get next year, right? And then going into the future, you always get that upside. And that also kind of going back to aligning like incentives, absolutely the 25%, that's the overhead. That's what it costs to quantify soil sampling, obviously profitability for indigo, but inherently, that's our interest too, is to get those prices as high as possible, because that's also how we make money. And there's a couple of programs, out there that maybe aren't as aligned with growers as we've tried to create ours. And then I'll throw out buyer network. We have a very strong group of buyers that I would even say beyond buyers, they're partners. I think going back to, we wanted to find companies that aren't not just buyers, but are partners in this journey. They're genuinely interested in supporting agriculture and kind of addressing climate change, and not just greenwashing, right? So it's companies that have done their due diligence internally, thinking about how they can be better stewards and meet their climate goals, and then partnering with us to think about not only how do they meet their climate goals into the future, but how do they support agriculture, specifically in the US and potentially internationally in the future. And then once again, just already hit on this one, but it's a win-win. We're a partner in the journey. Indigo, NICC, we're all in this together to support growers, ensure you have the most success, that you sequester the most carbon, and that you get the best price for that carbon, because that's, in general, in this ecosystem, that's everybody wins in that case. Yeah, that's a good, I'm not sure if I can hit on that specific part of it. I might have to ask a question, but it is a 75-25 split. So I can share that, yep, so for every carbon credit we produce, 75% of that goes to the grower. That other 25% is Indigo takes a chunk, NICC takes a chunk of that for their cost and support. And that's also the overhead, right? Comes out of that 25, as far as, once again, the soil sampling, quantification, verification. So I'm not sure if I have that doesn't necessarily talk on profit margin, but it's part of that 25. Mentioned earlier, obviously, about the amount of excitement that's happened around this, and specifically going back to that demand curve of companies that have come out and really, have come out with very aggressive science-based targets around where they want to go as far as climate change, and they're addressing their own greenhouse gas footprints. Once again, agriculture is a very attractive option because of, we think about land, you know, how much land is in agricultural production, as well as going back, you know, having that dual opportunity of implementing these practices and not just having a sequestration potential, but the abatement, avoiding releasing greenhouse gases is really exciting. That said, not every program is created, you know, the same. And I think, you know, going back to our partners, our buyers, back to the growers, back to the scientific community, we really took, you know, all of that input and interest and made sure we were meeting everybody and addressing their concerns and their needs. And that's, you know, thinking forward about like the long-term potential, that's really what's needed to make sure this has that runway to really take off into the future. You know, the first one here, registry issued, we'll dive into this one a little bit more in another slide, but making sure, you know, that somebody's checking our homework, somebody's making sure the science makes sense, making sure we're dealing with things like permanence and uncertainty in a scientific and statistical rigorous way that, you know, not only that the scientific community can sign on this, but that corporations are confident that when they purchase a carbon credit from Indigo, it's actual change, it's actual, you know, impact, and that they're not potentially doing some greenwashing. That's definitely where that really does come in, is if programs don't have a rigorous registry verified process that's not actually driving change and that you can measure and verify. Is that really just a opportunity to create perverse incentives, or is it really driving the change that we all want to see? The other one, you know, we pay for outcome. So when we have a fancy tool on our website that you all can check out. It's called a carbon calculator. But that's, you know, a great question that we get all the time. Hey, if I'm going to do cover crops on my farm, how much can I make? The answer is, I can give you an educated guess, but I can't give you a specific answer, because at the end of the day, we're not paying per practice. We are paying for performance. We do, as mentioned, we do soil sampling, a little bit of random soil sampling. We do mostly a biogeochemical model. We take a lot of farmer data and we crank that through a model to give us an estimate of where a field's at, according to, you know, that year's practice change. And then we actually pay on that outcome. So if it's a drought, you know, you're probably not going to make as much carbon as in a good year. You know, that's just like a crop, in that we do pay for performance. And that's, if anything, that's really exciting, mostly for buyers as well, and creating a strong market mechanism. Because once again, like if I'm a corporation, if I'm the scientific community, just paying for doing cover crops is probably not enough, right? Like you've got to ensure that we're incentivizing actual reduction in greenhouse gases. Otherwise, quite frankly, what's the point? If this is a climate solution, we need to be able to measure and verify that like there's actual climate impact happening. I'll jump through the last three. You know, we're the largest, most established program on the market today, especially when we think of registry issued, scientific verified. Broad eligibility, mentioned, JD already mentioned, you know, meeting growers where they are. It's not a, hey, you have to do no-till, you have to be cover crop. You can work within we can work within every operation and think about how can we tweak something to get a field eligible. And then lastly, market-based pricing. You know, we go out, once again, we're incentive aligned, you know, we're trying to get the highest price possible. And you know, that's very much aligned with incentivizing growers to participate in this program to make sure they get the most value for their carbon credits. It's a good question, Sarah. I think I got a slide coming up, then we're going to hit on this one. This is one that I want to throw out like two real quick. One is, this is where we currently operate. So I know for some some on the call might be further out west. We do not currently operate in. That's a little bit of a logistical, constraint. And we also want to make sure, we started with, goodness, maybe half the size. We kind of piloted this in year one, and then we slowly expanded this program. We're looking to continue to expand this program as we work forward. But we want to make sure we get it right before we keep moving. And so that's a big driver of this, of why we're in the states we're in today. Just making sure we get this right and we slowly build this out before we jump too far ahead of ourselves. Frankly, another driver of this is our eligible crop list. So there is some states that where we might run into some crops that are in, that we currently can't model. Well, I shouldn't say model, that we currently can't generate a carbon credit with. This is our current list. I can say the one big one that's probably missing on this one for some people calling in is perennials. So alfalfa, hay production, something we're working very hard with, as well as with grazing, to make sure that we can get that in our program as soon as possible. I'll leave this for maybe a second before I jump on, but this is the pros and cons of going with a registry approach. There's scientific standards that we need to hit, specifically on like modeling and calculations. And as it is today with alfalfa and perennials, we're still working a little bit with the data gap in regards to, is there enough peer-reviewed research out there that we can kind of align with to be able to validate and calibrate our model that not only the Climate Action Reserve, but that the scientific community will sign off on, that yes, indigo can model a perennial and is within a certain confidence interval that we feel confident that when indigo says it's 1.2 tons, that we feel confident it's within that confidence interval. So that's one of the things holding us up a little bit on expanding it into perennials, expanding it into grazing. But it's also something we're working really hard on to get that to be part of the program as soon as possible. On the other side, this, as we mentioned, going back to that chart of demand, there's a lot of companies that are not only saying they want to be carbon neutral, but they want to be, it's called STEI, which is science targeted environmental impacts, I believe. So it's a specific kind of guidelines that companies, not only are they shooting to be carbon neutral, but they have to follow science-based approaches. And one of them, that's one reason why a lot of companies are really excited about our program, why we've been able to get the demand we have, is that going through a registry kind of is a great stamp of approval that we have a robust process in place, and that this is not just indigo saying like we sequestered a ton of carbon. It's the registry. We also have verifiers that are confirming that what we say is real and that it's scientifically grounded, to give buyers in the scientific community the confidence this is like real change and real impact. And yeah, I'm gonna take 1 second actually, because I feel like I got some questions. Sarah had the question about customers. We have a list, and I can actually pull that up at the end, but I can throw out a few offhand, like New Belgium's a big customer of ours. Dogfish Head, we have a lot of breweries, oddly enough. I think a lot of, as probably people here know, a lot of especially craft breweries, just by maybe where they are and kind of that like third wave brewery movement, are also very environmentally conscious, have a lot of environmental goals baked into their company values. So we've had a lot of great opportunities to work with breweries. As well, we've worked with Shopify. The North Face is another big customer of ours, as well as Ralph Lauren. Yeah, and I can say, going back to Brian's earlier point, we've been selective. I think especially looking at the buyer side of carbon offsets today, there's a very lucrative market, and to go with petrol companies. There's a lot of companies out there that have to offset some of their emissions based on international markets, and that's a very attractive financial opportunity. As a company, we have not and have continued to not engage with that part of the market, mostly going back to the partner side, like the partnership. Like, we want companies that are truly aligned with being part of the climate solution. We feel like there's a lot of baggage and negative aspects to maybe signing on with a large petrol company, and so we've avoided that. We've really tried to find partners that are aligned with what we believe in, that are truly invested in being grower first and in climate first. So I think that's really important to us.
Brian, I can touch on that second question that I think Sarah had around no-till farming and herbicide applications. How does it affect the methodology? Really when you look at, say, specifically no-till, and where they're utilizing different programs, different herbicide programs, the big driver in the methodology comes from surely from the number of passes. And as we decrease the number of passes, that increases or decreases the amount of greenhouse gas that's being emitted. So less diesel, less fertilizer, all those things that are figured in a no-till situation. Granted, it's much, much less than it would be, say, in a conventional till situation where they're out there, doing 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 passes or whatever, and deep tillage or anything like that. But the amounts of the different herbicides or pesticides or whatever within a tank mix don't weigh as much as the number of passes that are being made on the field.
I'll also hit on Sarah's other question about registries. So absolutely. So with the Climate Action Reserve, our program project is national. So there's no restriction there. Like, we can operate in California or Oregon in your case. So there's nothing holding us back there. It truly is a little bit of making sure we have our processes in place before we move on to another state, as well as going back to, I think probably the biggest thing is the crops. Do we kind of want to make sure that we're doing business, we're doing this right. And I think we've come a long way in making sure that we've smoothed out and streamlined our program. But I think the next big probably push is going to be, we're focusing on getting perennials into our program, and then to extend grazing and livestock. Those two are pretty big priorities, probably even more so than territory expansion. But I think they'll probably be connected. I think once we get those into the program, I think expanding it out to new states is absolutely our next goal. Because yes, from the registry perspective, we can operate anywhere within the United States, but we still need, for any crop, we need to have it be what we call calibrated and validated within our model with the registry to be able to generate a carbon credit off it.
And Lynn, I think, someone has their hand raised, but I can't see what it is. I don't think Brian can either. And I don't know if you want to hold those to the end or.
It's up to you. Did you want to go ahead and answer the hand question?
We can hit that.
Okay. So whoever that is, sorry, you're on the phone. I can't see your name, but you can go ahead, unmute yourself.
We got a New Mexico 505.
coming
Yes,
on.
it's me. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm calling from New Mexico, so I guess my first question is, have you expanded into New Mexico? I don't have the visual map, so I don't know where you're all at.
Apologies. We have not yet. It is on our list. It's definitely something, yeah, we're very, very looking forward to moving into. We're not currently, we are in Texas and in Colorado, but haven't moved into New Mexico yet. I can put an exception to that. If you are specifically a Native American producer through NIC, with our partnership with NICC, we can have, you know, further conversation there. We're looking at expanding it specifically with Native American producers in New Mexico, but we're not, I would say, commercially available in New Mexico quite yet.
Okay, so my question is kind of like futuristic, but also current. I'm Navajo, and I live in the checkerboard region of the reservation in Eastern Navajo Agency. And we have a lot of Indian allotment land. That's how it's legally defined. And a lot of fracking is taking place in a number of counties on Indian allotment land, where there was very cloudy and gray tribal jurisdiction, state jurisdiction, and even federal jurisdiction. So I have share holdings in Indian allotment land, and there's no fracking going on where I live. There's no extraction going on where I live. And this is something that I'm interested in learning more about because of the gray area over in the extraction area. I'm just kind of like parlaying that grayness over to my area and just thinking if I can get all of my share allottees to agree, I wonder if we can participate in this carbon market for land that, you know, I don't know what the criteria is. I'm totally brand new into listening to this, but it just seems like there's a possibility here. So it's futuristic, but yet reality based, and I'm just interested in learning more about it. So thank you I don't know if it's a question or a comment or just a curiosity, but I'm just putting it out there.
Brian, we can maybe take this offline and get her connected with Brian Van Stippen. That seems to be the angle there.
Yeah, Sunny, I'm happy to do a direct email introduction between you and Bryan so that you guys can chat more about that.
And then, Sunny, this is Brian
Perfect.
Van Stippen from the National Indian Carbon Coalition. But the short answer to your question is yes, we can do carbon projects on allotted lands.
Awesome. Thank you. Sarah, relay my information to Bryan. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Great questions. Yeah, I mean, I want to make sure we hit on all the topics. We've already hit on this one, so we can probably move on. I mean, just more so, once again, I think, you know, really where we've tried to design our program as best as we can is to make sure that we are, you know, we're scientifically based, that we have alignment and buy-in from the scientific community, that what we're doing is real, it's conservative, we're actually delivering the impact that we're saying, as well as going through, you know, that verification registry process to, at the end of the day, bring value to growers, bring value to our partners on the buyer side, that like, hey, they really genuinely want to support farmers. They really want to actually be better stewards of the land. But they're, you know, I think rightfully so, they're a little gun shy because there's been programs in the past that haven't gone through probably all the steps they needed to make sure that what they were doing was real, that what they were doing was legitimate. And so, a couple of early adopters got burned, and I think that's where we're at. We're trying to make sure we're learning from those past experiences and build on that to make sure that we're, as mentioned, we're hitting all of our key stakeholders there with farmers, with the buyers, and with the scientific community to make sure that we're actually doing what we're hoping we are doing. I think we can kind of maybe jump through this one. I think we've already talked about, once again, there's reasons to do this. Like, JD, Bryan, and I are here talking about the carbon market side, but maybe the most exciting part about this is, irregardless of that, there's reasons to do this on your operation agronomically, right? When we talk about how increasing your soil health and organic matter, how that impacts other parts of your operation. So even beyond the carbon potential, there's other reasons why we think this would, be a great opportunity for your operation regardless. JD, I don't know if you had any.
Yeah, no, and Bryan likes to glass over that portion of it, but as a soil scientist, a soil nerd myself, that is the driving factor to me. Whenever we start looking at the benefits to soil health, increased water holding capacity, reduction of petrochemical inputs, increased resiliency of the following crop, those are things that really kind of get me going, right? And that's what my team is there to help really come alongside producers and help them see that vision going forward. And it's those soil health benefits, those multi-generational benefits that really are a secondary benefit of participating in a carbon market.
Absolutely. We just have two more sections, and then we'll open it up to questions. One is as far as our program, what the process is. I should maybe also highlight the first part would be to reach out to Bryan Van Stippen. If you are a Native American producer, Bryan is, will help kind of get this project kind of started and kicked off. Otherwise, though, even beyond that, it is really kind of four key steps: signing up, providing, be it if you have shape files, or we have also a very easy to use software that you can find your field. You can just map it out and enroll that field into the program. I think that's also another call out there. Our program is a field by field eligibility. So we mentioned earlier about perennials and livestock grazing. And that's at this time, we're working hard to get those into the program. That said, if you have other fields that you're doing just row crops on, those are great. You can definitely sign those fields up. It's not an operation level. You can do, if you just want to sign up one field this year, that's fine. Completely okay. It is a field by field eligibility. So just wanted to call that one out there, especially with the perennials and with grazing. Hey, if part of your land is into pasture, that's fine. We're working to get those fields eligible. But if you have other land that's in row crop production, those are the fields you can enroll today. And then, thinking about, especially working with JD and his team, thinking about how do we make some practice changes? What are some things, some low-hanging fruit we can tinker with and maybe switch up the operation a little bit, not only to ideally improve, as we talked about, soil health and all these other great impacts and benefits, but also how to make sure that you qualify, that you're getting the most opportunity and potential of the program. The other one we'll talk about, or maybe we won't talk about today, but we'll absolutely be able to follow up on, is farm records. We talked about our model and verification. It's important that when we run your field through our model, that once again, that it's accurate, that what actually happened there is properly captured, and that we, pay you for what actually happened. Part of that is, making sure you have farm data, farm records. We're not talking machine data, even though we do have a partnership with John Deere to help better flow, streamline that data entry. You don't need that though. You can work, we have another team that can work with you to help upload your other data, even if it is just, implanting books or whatever. So you don't need to have a digital record. You don't have to have software or anything like that. You just have to be able to, provide information about, when you planted and stuff like that, when you harvested. And then lastly, once we go through that process, we eventually, you get paid for all of that. But this one is even maybe a better roadmap of what actually happens. And I like this, we have the generate, the verify and store, and then the sell process. So, thinking of generate, that's absolutely, that's where Bryan and NICC are involved, thinking about, how we get in touch with you all. How do we make sure that we identify the right fields and the right practices to be, as successful as possible in your operation. And then lastly, there, definitely get that data that we need to be able to effectively run the model and get you through final filing to be able to generate a carbon credit. This middle part, this is really where Indigo, this is where we kind of take over, in addition to going back to our verifier, where we kind of bring in the data, do kind of a data check, actually run this through our models, do some verification, making sure hey, if you say you planted a cover crop, being able to potentially use some different technologies to confirm, yep, this person planted a cover crop, so that the registry is really confident in what we're saying. And then lastly, signing off and kind of stamping on our math, basically checking our homework and making sure what we're calculating is right and correct, and actually having the impact that we say we have. And then lastly, once the registry has signed off on our report and issued carbon credits, then we turn around and we sell those to our buyers that have, luckily, as we mentioned, kind of partners, they've prepaid and pre-committed to our program. So, and here's just a few other names there, like Blue Bottle Coffee, Maple Leaf, and Barclays. That is a great question that came up. Is the Indigo program only available to the property owner operator, or is it also available for leased land? And it is absolutely available for leased land. Our program, contractually, is with the operator. We do have farms that do a crop share agreement with the landowner. That's completely okay. But for the most part, for us as a program, we primarily have had the contract with the operator, because at the end of the day, you should obviously have those conversations with the landowner before jumping in fully in. But at the end of the day, it's the operator who's the one making these decisions, making the change, and is producing the crop. So that's a great question. I know we're running short on time. This one I just wanted to share, talking about just really some excitement around this program. Indigo was, the first to market for this agricultural carbon credit opportunity. The biggest kind of shining achievement of that was here in June, when we had our first issuance, if you would. And that's exactly what I talked about the registry. We went through, we did the calculations, the verifications, growers submitted their data, and we actually got the registry to officially put the stamp of approval and actually sell carbon credits to our buyers. So that was just a really exciting opportunity for us. If anything, just solidifying, like, this is a real market. This has real, runway and potential moving forward, and we're really excited to continue to expand and grow this as, year over year, get more growers involved, get more land in the program, and ideally get growers paid more every year. It's a great little video about the event, but we'll skip that for now. Just really wanted to highlight, what went into that. Once again, it was farmers adopting practices, farmers, with definitely support, collecting and submitting all their data. Us here going through that quality assurance, like reviewing that data, make sure everything was right, all the I's dotted, T's crossed, actually running the model on those fields and ensuring that, yep, we have accurate calculations of what the impact actually was, submitting that to the registry and having them review it, having a verifier come through and make sure that, yep, Indigo said this happened on this field, and being able to look and say, yep, that actually happened. And then finally, after getting all that done, everything, passed and signed off on, finally the registry actually saying, yep, this is real. This is a real thing. And so once again, we're really excited about that first step, especially looking forward that that's only going to get easier every year now that it's more streamlined. And obviously, I think also setting the market. We really see this as the future, going back to that, especially companies and the scientific community really want to see this type of process in place, that you've gone through a registry, that you've gone through a verifier, that you're actually bringing the value that you say you are. And so I think we've had some of our competitors follow suit and are starting to try, go through this registry process. So it's validating that, yes, this is kind of what the market is saying, that this is what they're going to want to see moving forward. And it's also validating to see it's possible. We actually did it, which was really exciting. And I should say we, as in all the growers, obviously the registry, the scientific community, everybody kind of coming together in partnership to get this done. But yeah.
And to follow up on Bryan Bartle there, again, one of the things that the National Indian Carbon Coalition is engaged with Indigo is to try to bring more Indigenous producers into this marketplace and provide these opportunities to producers that have this great chance to participate in the carbon marketplace. And we think that these practices and programs make a lot of sense. And through our USDA grant, which we just received in July of this year, we are looking for pilot partners to participate. So if there's individual tribal nation member producers out there that would want to explore these opportunities, we do have some funding, as well as tribal nation producers. So my tribe, the Oneida Nation, we have a tribal farm, and we have been engaging with conversations to have them participate and implement no-till and cover crop practices. But again, it could be tribal nation, it could be individual, it could be non-tribal that can work directly with Indigo. So there's a lot of different opportunities here, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to provide this information through this Regenerate webinar today, and why we wanted to participate virtually for this conference. Unfortunately, not able to participate in person, maybe next year. But again, we wanted to thank Cubana for the opportunity to do this presentation and to talk about these opportunities, specifically with Indigenous populations. But again, this is for any producer out there, and we think it makes a lot of sense, and they're excited to have and finally be able to move forward with introducing these types of programs into Indian country and beyond.
Absolutely. And cannot say enough thank you to Cubana and also everyone here that jumped on today. And just the great questions and feedback. Really appreciate it. It's, you know, admittedly, this is very new. There's a lot of information flying around out there. So having you all take the time today to jump on, and I mean, I hope the three of us were able to provide a little more information, a little more clarity into what carbon markets, carbon credits are, and like how does that play into agriculture.